Okay, here we have what I think will be the last part, and we'll talk about the two remaining brain network reinforcements that we've not discussed. I said that there were 7 total. We talked about the big 3, default cognitive limbic, then we talked about the tango partners, dorsal attention network, ventral attention network. That means we have 2 left, visual network and the somatomotor network. Let's talk about visual. The visual network is pretty straight ahead with the name. It involves the capacity to process information through sight, external sight, and interestingly, internal sight. The mind's eye, you could say. So when you realize how critical vision is for the human being, how much of the brain is dedicated to it, you realize this is an extremely important network. Now, I don't expect that you're going to have benefits for people with eye problems. So it's not an eye thing, it's the processing of information in the brain relative to sight. Now, this also means imagination. Being able to see in your mind's eye is as important a creative talent as also being able to organize what you see outside. And you can even hear it in language where a person says, "Oh, I just can't see myself doing that." Or people that complain that they can't visualize something. Like in the tantric techniques, in Tibetan Buddhism especially, there's an awful lot of visualization that takes place because it's natural to our abilities, so it's used as a spiritual technique. Now, if you can't visualize, I say, well, can you imagine? And what you realize is that a lot of what you imagine, you interpret visually. So working with the visual network, that brain network, is both going to fortify the integration of visual inflow as well as integrating the visioning that goes along with mental imagery. And you can even extend this into dreaming. The idea of being able to see and incorporate in that fragmented, very loose, nonlinear dream state. So the visual network is a fascinating one to explore. I understand it less well than other aspects of brain networks, in part because the information about it is not quite as expressed. Okay, visual network. The last one, the somato. Soma from the Greek means body, and the somatomotor means the network that's involved in integrating and interpreting brain activity with the motor movements of our body, like I'm doing right now with my arms and my head and hands. The motor movements. There is a somatosensory network. I don't know why it wasn't included in the research. I've not been able to access it, which is why it's not in the brain gym. So what can I do? I tried. Frustrates me a bit, I'll say, but in any case, the somatomotor is extremely powerful because of the fact that our human body is made to move. Animal bodies move, which is preposterously important in terms of all the things that make us who we are. Unlike plants that are rooted, we can move around. And you know that in neuroplastic reinforcements in general, you've got 3 types, 3 categories. That we kind of separate them theoretically. They exist as one experience, but we've got motor, movement, that's 1. We've got mental or cognition, that's 2, and we have all the various sensory, that's 3, and this is, of course, where the Neuralite fits. When you're working with the movement motor aspects of brain function, because anytime you move, believe me, your brain is acting. You can't separate them, they're actually one thing. It's a unified principle. So anytime that you want to help a person somatize, come into their body, the somatomotor network is an excellent aspect of brain exercise. You know, I'll take a risk to say it helps in a grounding process because, you know, there are people that begin to disassociate from their body. That's part of the problem in the limbic trauma loop issue, you know, from what's called polyvagal theory, to not get too complicated. We have a general state that's called social harmony, and when that's disrupted, we go into the fight or flight. So in social harmony, sympathetic, parasympathetic are dancing back and forth very happily. In the threatened state, we drop into a sympathetic dominant state, a fight or flight, but there's a more archaic, a more primitive way of dealing with threat, because not all creatures are strong enough to fight, not all creatures are fast enough to flee. So an even more archaic, a deeper, more primitive response is the freeze. So you've got fight, flight, but more deep is the freeze. And in that freeze state,